Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership for TEPSA. Each week, I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another, and invite them on to share a piece of their story in hopes that it inspires you to tell more of yours. I am thrilled this week to have my friend Juan Gonzalez Jr. on with me today. Juan, tell everybody a little bit about who you are.
Hi everyone, Todd. Like I said earlier, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk with you. But my name is Juan Gonzalez Jr. I am a Texas teacher.
Mhm.
I teach third grade. For the past 9 years, I taught literature. I was departmentalized, so I just did ELA, and then this year I'm back to self-contained, so I'm learning everything again. So it's been like being a new teacher again, but it's been very exciting. And aside from being a teacher, I also share my life on Instagram, and
Mhm.
my handle is Teaching Third with Mr. G, and that is something that I'm sure we'll talk about tonight. But that is something that I never imagined would bring this whole new layer of teaching that I'm super grateful for, and the privilege of it is just amazing. So I also share my life there, and with that comes different speaking opportunities and just getting to meet and connect with other teachers. So it's been cool. So I am first and foremost a teacher, but I also have all these little side things that allows me to keep that spark alive.
I mean, all of us teachers put our hands in a lot of different fires.
Yes.
Well, Juan, growing up, what was school like for you? Like, obviously you're a teacher now, but when you were
Yeah,
a kid, did you enjoy school?
100%. I think, and I always talk about like, most jobs that I've had has always been some type of like after school or summer camp. And so I've always known like the school year. Like I know what like the school seasons. I know what it feels like to have the beginning of the school year. I know what it's like to have the fall break and the winter break. And those types of things always excited me. And so when I was a kid, I loved school. I loved my teachers. I loved school supplies. I just loved being in school. And that's a testament to the amazing teachers that I had. And when I was in high school, my junior year, there was a program called Trooper School. And what it was we would take in 3 and 4 year olds, and we would develop lesson plans. And it was kind of like a daycare for parents. And the kids would come in and we'd get to practice what it was like to be a teacher. And I remember my junior year, like I signed up for it because it was 2 periods and I was super excited about it. And there was like certain weeks you either were like preparing snacks or you were preparing lessons. And I remember I was making hot dogs and I was sitting there and I was like thinking about life and who I was going to be as I grew up. And I remember just sitting there in that kitchen and being like, I'm going to be a teacher. Like it just hit me like I'm going to be a teacher. And from that point on, like that was always the end goal. Like have my own classroom, be a teacher. And so through high school, I knew that. Into college, I knew that as well. And every job that I took on while I was in college had something to do with education. So I knew what it was like to be around kids. And for me, those relationships is always what gets me to where I need my kids to be and get them to grow. So just school has always just been part of my life and something that excites me. And me just talking about it now, like you can probably hear it in my
You
voice.
can
Like I
tell. You
love
can
talking
tell.
about I love
So,
doing it. So yeah, school's always just been part like of who I am.
and have you always been more leaned toward the elementary grade levels as compared to secondary?
Yes, when I was in college, I did an after school program, and it was for a private school, and they needed a long term sub because a teacher was going out on maternity leave, and it was for sixth and seventh grade math. And I was like, maybe this is it. Like maybe middle school's my calling. And so I did that for 2 weeks, and that was horrifying. Like I would never do kids that big again ever, just because I just remember I had that like unbalance of like me wanting them to like me or think I was cool, and it was like a really weird place. But what I've learned now about elementary school, what I love about it, is they're little, but they really are just like little humans, right, with these big thoughts, and I love being around that every single day. I love um, the way that kids think. I love that. I sometimes I think we underestimate their ability to be compassionate or the big thinking that they have, and so I feel so lucky and privileged that I get to be around that every day.
I love that. Well, Juan, to shift gears a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
you're based in the Houston area, which is right up
Yeah.
the road from me. And I remember, I've been following you online for a while, and it's so weird because, you're right up the road from me, and we've
Uh-huh.
literally never met in person, but I feel
Yeah.
like I know you from your Instagram.
Yes.
And so it's kind of one of those creepy factors of like, oh, yeah, I know you were over here. Oh, yeah, you were doing this. And I'm like, yeah, I
Yes.
was following your Instagram. But I remember a few years ago, when Hurricane Harvey hit, your area was one of those that was really, really pretty badly hit.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about what that was like going through something where not only is your school building itself affected, but
Mhm.
also the kids' lives and how you pick the pieces up from that. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I remember Hurricane Harvey. Like I still remember the whole saga of it, like leading up to like me being with my team after school and lesson planning and being with my team and having to talk about like, is school going to close down? Is it not going to close down? And then finally getting the alert like, okay, it's going to close down. And remember the hurricane like looking like it was going towards Corpus and we were safe. And then that following day, like that crazy rainstorm that happened, and I remember there was like a big fight on TV, and like lots of families were at people's different houses watching that. And I remember going to bed that night to like tornado sounds, right? And I thought like, okay, we're gonna be safe. And I was like staying awake because the alarms kept going off. And then finally I fell asleep and then I woke up. And when I woke up, my phone was just lit up with text messages from coworkers. And turn on the news and I see that our area was one of the heaviest impacted areas from the rainstorm. And I had coworkers whose houses were flooded. I had just thinking about it, I just remember it was a nightmare state. Like I
Right.
had no idea. Like I guess you can never really plan for something like that to happen. You never know what you're going to do in a situation like that. And so that began the journey of like figuring out like how do you help people, what's going to happen, because we were out of work for 3 weeks, we weren't in the school. Our school was impacted with a little bit of flooding, but it was the surrounding homes that really had the impact. And so figuring out like who are the colleagues that lost homes, who needed support, and then finding the help to get there. And so after the initial scare of it, like with every big thing that happens, it's like amazing how a community can come together and support each other. And the outpour that didn't just come from our community, but from all over the country, people who wanted to help and bring that stuff in. And so those 3 weeks was a lot about just rebuilding the community. But then came, what is it going to be like? We don't know what students were affected, what were their experiences like, who's still here, who's not here. And that year was one of the hardest teaching years just because so many of our students were rebuilding their life. The
Right.
students who the families who decided to stay were now living in RVs in their apartment outside of their house while they were rebuilding their home. Or I had so many students where their story was, we're living on our top floor, but they didn't have a bottom floor that was being renovated. And so for me, that experience was one that I've always known, but really truly experienced being aware of what our students are going through, and then just kind of tailoring it to what they needed, right?
Right.
And so that year was really just about listening and paying attention to the families and supporting. And in a weird way, that was one of our best years just because it was so free of all these things that we put on ourselves that we need to do or things that we need to achieve. When we just listened to the kids and we paid attention to our community, I still feel like that was one of our best years because we were so zoned in on what we needed as opposed to all the things we think we need to do.
Well, and something that I find interesting too is, this was a couple years ago now.
Mhm.
And what happens is in these big situations, they make national news. Everybody
Mhm.
sees that there's an outpouring of support from all over the country and the world. But then, like everything in life, a few weeks
Yeah.
pass and it's like it's been forgotten. And what I'm
Right.
often reminded of, and I'm not in at the exact same area you're in, but what I'm often reminded of is that when I drive through Houston is there's so many areas that still are being rebuilt that still aren't
Mhm.
done. Are you finding that with some of your students that some of them are still also in that process of still trying to get their lives back from something that happened years ago?
Yeah, and I will. So I teach in a what we call an education village. So we have an elementary side and a middle school side,
Mm.
and so some of those students that I had there are now in fifth and
Right.
sixth grade. And so like I still know the ones that were severely affected, and so like I will seek them out just to kind of see some updates, because some of that is still ongoing as far as putting their house back together, or just even in the Dickinson community. Like we built we saw a lot of rebuilding, but there's still some areas that kind of have these patches of like the memories of what happened with that storm.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to kind of have this be part of our conversation tonight, because I
Hmm.
think that's so important to remember, is that when people go through these natural disasters and these things happen, and it's just like when you're grieving a loss of a loved one, it's like everybody's there right at the beginning, but it's as that time progresses that you need to check
Hmm.
in on people and see where they are and still see how you can help with things, because just
Right.
because a few weeks have passed doesn't mean that everybody's all healed up.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I want to switch gears for just a second, Juan, because
Hmm.
you are doing something this summer that I think is one of the coolest things I have ever seen done for teachers. And I
Hmm.
was so tempted to sign up. I'm not, because it's totally outside, way a little bit too much outside my comfort zone, but I'm just
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I want you to kind of talk about what's coming this summer that you're doing, because I think it is so cool.
Yes. So, one of the privileges that I've talked about that have come with sharing my teaching life on Instagram is that, I get to speak at conferences and I get to speak with other teachers. And those are so important. And I love attending them. I love being able to speak at them. And I love the energy that you get from being around teachers and getting to talk. But also, I just love listening and talking to teachers. And so sometimes when you go to these conferences, the information is it's one way. And so for a while, I was just kind of thinking like, what could I create that would allow this like community of teachers to really like interact in life. Like I love social media because I get to see what's going on in other people's classrooms and we get to talk online. So how can I have that exist in real life? And so, like I said, a lot of my jobs that I had when I was in college had to do with education. And one of them, for 3 years, I worked at a summer camp. And in that summer camp, every day was different because it kind of like summer field trips came through and we taught them about nature and we hung out. And I loved that experience. And as a kid, I've always wanted to go to summer camp and I never did. But in college, that was my little time where I got a taste of what camp could be
Mhm.
like. And ever since then, it's like I've always been chasing that like excitement that I got from camp. And so now that I have this platform, I decided to team up with some friends, and we're making a summer camp for teachers. And it's going to be a summer camp where teachers are going to come together and we are going to talk about what we do. And I think it's very powerful when we get teachers together and we just let them to talk and we can connect and we can talk about the things that are the same and things that are different. It's super powerful. So I'm just so excited. And then to do it in a camp setting, which is classic summer vibe. It's just going to be so fun. So we're going to get teachers together. We're going to summer camp. We're going to do all the summer things. We're going to do some learning. I'm just so excited. And I think once people see what it is and people, once this first summer rolls around, I think a lot of people are going to want to be part of that or add it to their summer experiences.
Well, and what I love about it is the unique aspect of it. I mean, we see so many conferences that are done in cool locations in Vegas and big buildings, even on a
Hmm.
cruise ship. Like we see all these neat things,
Yeah.
but this idea of going to camp with your
Hmm.
fellow teachers, I'm just like, that is so cool. And I love
Yes.
how like you've really put a lot of thought and effort into this from what I've seen online, like to the design of what you have, to even really thinking about planning, even planning so extensively where it's like what really stuck out to me, what I loved about when I was looking at your site, was that it was like, you know what, we want you to have this camp experience. So we're going to have these bunks where you can bunk with your teachers. But if you want to come and learn and that's really not your style, like there's other room options to kind
Yeah.
of fit you. And so you really took teachers into mind when thinking
Yeah.
about this. And so, so where is it and when is it?
So the camp is happening July 23rd through the 26th, and it's in Livingston, Texas. And so what we did is we were looking at so many different campsites, and what we know what to do is to be teachers, and we know what teachers need. What we don't know is what it's like to run a camp. So what was super important was to find an established camp who knows the routines and knows the things that need to be in place to have a successful experience, and partner up with them. So the camp that we are having is at Camp Cholla in Livingston, Texas, and it's really cool because a lot of my students, I've written grants or I've written proposals for them to get grants to attend those camps. prior to me ever this coming into existence. So it just felt like this harmonious, like this was supposed to happen because this was a camp that in a weird way I was already connected to through my
I
students.
love it.
And so now we're taking over for that little time period. And I'm just so excited. I can't wait for just to see it happen. And I know that once we get once we have this experience and we get teachers together, I'm so excited of like what it will do for not just me, but for teachers,
Yeah,
for
exactly.
the teachers who get to attend. Because also, I get to travel with teachers. I've worked with other companies where I've traveled and we
Hmm.
visited other countries. And in those moments, that's where I really saw too, like how how fulfilling this profession is, but at the same time can be so lonely.
Yeah.
And so there's something about like even me, like I talk about how I talk at conferences and I share my life on social media, but like in front of my own colleagues, the ones I see every day, I still feel very like timid
Hmm.
and like because I
Hmm.
don't ever want to feel like I'm an all-knowing being because I'm not.
Right.
And so there's something about when you get out of your own teacher network, the school that you're working in, and you're around other teachers, there's a braveness that kind of sets in where you can really share your successes and things that you're still working on. And so I think it's really good for teachers to jump out of their own bubbles and find other bubbles to jump into to kind of shine different parts of who they are as teachers.
So, Juan, if somebody is looking for more information, where can they go for more information?
So you can visit us on our website, campteachandgrow.com, and also on Instagram, Camp Teach and Grow is the name of our camp.
Campteachandgrow.com.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, awesome. I'll put it here in the comments too. So
Cool.
one, I want to shift gears again and just
Yeah.
because I had to talk about that because I knew if I didn't ask about that, I was going to forget. And I'm like so obsessed with that idea because I'm like, it is so cool and unique and brilliant. So I'm so excited to see how it turns out for you. But shifting gears just
Thank
a little
you.
bit again, when you think about your life and all the
Mhm.
experiences you've had in your life that have led to where you are now and made you the man you are today, when you reflect on those experiences, what is one that really sticks out that that you think, this happening to me really helped make me who I am today?
Um, so I'm so lucky, and I will always keep using the word privileged and lucky that I've had so many amazing experiences in my life. But I think the biggest shift of who I am now in my adult life is one part, this big chunk of between high school and college. I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer, and so I was diagnosed at a stage 4, and so the cancer was in my neck, chest, abdomen, and pelvis. And that was one of the hardest things that I've ever gone through. It's something that I think about every single day. But I remember that when that happened to me, it was really bad in the beginning. Like I was severely depressed. I didn't know, like I was young and I thought like I was graduating high school and I was going to like live this life that I had planned for myself. And all of a sudden it was taken away from me. And so when that happens, there's this bitterness that I remember feeling and like not wanting to go through it. And I think that was also my young mind not really knowing life at that point, right? Because I was at the cusp of like this new beginning, and then it got taken away, and so I got angry.
Mhm.
And so the story I always tell is like I remember being so bitter, and I was in my chemo chair, and I was sitting next to this man who's also receiving chemotherapy, and he kept wanting to have engage in conversation with me, and I wouldn't. Like I would just sit there angry, and he finally just said to me, "It could be worse." And those words to me like just totally changed my life because I realized like I'm still here, like I could still make something of it.
Right.
And I don't know who that man was. I never got to thank him. It was just his words, and I still remember his face that stuck with me. And in that moment, like the optimism that started to set in, and who I think that's what started building who I am now. And so, luckily, in remission, I've been in remission now for I passed the 10-year mark, so I'm allowed to call myself cancer free. So it's super exciting. And now, because of that experience, I'm not afraid to take on life. I'm not afraid to just try, and I'm not afraid to be myself. And there's still learning curves, and there's still a lot of me that I'm still developing. But because of that experience, there's a part of me that's not scared. And so I'm really lucky to have that because that's what pushes me to try different things.
And that's a powerful story. I mean, congratulations on being cancer free, since you said
Thank
you
you.
reached that 10-year mark. So that I know is exciting.
Hmm.
But I think for you to be able to reflect and go, this really helped create who I am, and this adventure
Hmm.
spirit and this and all of that, I think it's really powerful. Being someone who has had cancer before, do
Hmm.
you ever have that fear of it returning, and do you ever have that kind of seep in and begin to take hold, and how do you battle that?
100%. Like I could feel like a weird pain, or if my, sometimes is my cold lasting too long. So like these little voices happen in the back of my head,
Mhm.
but I have to know that I can't pay attention to that fear. So when they do seep in, I'm very quick to talk to myself and say like, hey, take care of yourself. I try to get myself in the good mind frame, but I
Mhm.
think like I probably think about it every single day, just because it was such a huge part
Right.
of what happened to me, and it was a very scary thing. You can't ever get over it. So yeah, it pops in your brain. You think about it. Sometimes I talk about it with my parents. I talk about it with my friends, or I journal about it, or I just read. Um, there's different ways depending on how I'm feeling that I deal with it. But absolutely, it always creeps in and tries to take over, and I won't let it.
And I think that can play into a lot of people listening, even if they don't have something like that. It's just the idea of doubt. It's just that whole idea
Yeah.
of, is something happening? Is something coming back? And I love the what you said of, you have to stop and talk to yourself and tell yourself what
Hmm.
is real and what isn't real. And I think that's important for
Hmm.
people to hear. So Juan, when reflecting again and continuing to reflect, you mentioned this gentleman in the hospital, and
Hmm.
outside of him and your family, of course, who
Yeah.
would you say is somebody that really impacted your trajectory?
Um, my mom. My mom is somebody. She had me super young. My mom was 16 when she had me, and my dad too. My mom is always like the one like in the forefront who's like fighting the battles and like talking to us. And my dad is like the silent like just supporter in the background. So sometimes I don't think I give him enough credit. But my mom is the more vocal one, so she's the first one that popped in my head. I'm just so lucky that I have parents that are good role models. Prior, even before the cancer, they've always been people who are just told us to like live our life and be our authentic selves and be good to yourselves and be good to people. And during that journey, when I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, they were so strong and so supportive, and were always optimistic. And to this day, like even when I have doubt on just like regular life things, they're just amazing people, and I'm so glad I have them.
I love that. Well, Juan, before I ask my last question, I want to address something somebody put in the comments. They said, "Can administrators go to camp too?"
Yes. What? So our goal is to not put a label on what grade level you teach or what you do in the school system. We want to invite all of you because we all are a beneficial part of the school system. And I think sometimes when we put a label like I'm just a third grade teacher or I'm just an administrator, it doesn't mean that you can't contribute to the bigger conversation. And I think just having conversations with people with different experiences can spark something that you need to hear, or some advice that you might be needing from someone. So yes, admin, teachers, librarians, come join us. It'll be amazing.
I love it. Well, okay, so Juan, the last question I always love to ask my guests is, and this does not have to be an education answer, it can be whatever
Mhm.
comes to mind. So, if there was one thing that you wish more people knew or understood, what would your one thing be?
Ooh, Todd, that was a good one. Okay. What? So I think what I wish more people knew, right? That was your question.
New
What
or
you
understood?
wish
Yep.
people knew. Because I'm so passionate about education, I've got to take it to education. Um, what I wish more people knew was that our school systems, there's more good in our school happening than bad. And I think sometimes it's so much easier to jump on to the negative stories. But I know not just myself, but my friends, the colleagues that I work with, the teachers that I met, there are teachers in there doing the best they can and doing so much for our students. And no one is shining light on that as much as it should. And of course, I believe we're part of a system that is broken and needs a lot of support. But the teachers in there and the admin and the people who are showing up every single day, like they are working their butts off. And I just wish people, I think like as a collective society, we know like it's an admirable profession and we respect teachers, but I don't think people really know how hard teachers are working and how much we devote ourselves to our students and to this profession. Um, so yeah, I just want if that's what I want to talk about. I want to say that I wish just people knew how hard teachers work and how much we give and how much it becomes a part of who we are. I think this is like one of the jobs that we take on that it's very hard to take off that hat, even though it's important to be a teacher and then also be who you are. It's one of these professions where it just blends itself so much that sometimes it gets a little cloudy. But I think it's because how much we care and how hard we work.
I love that. Well, Juan, I don't tell you enough, but I have been so inspired by so many of the different things that you've shared online. And when I was thinking of people who I wanted to invite this month, I knew I had to ask you. So I was so excited when you said yes. And so please keep doing the amazing work you're doing online. People are watching and learning from you, and they don't reach out very often all the time to tell you that, but I appreciate so much of you coming on here and sharing some different sides of yourself. And I just loved our conversation. So thank you, Juan.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for everybody for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. It is there. I hope my guest this week has inspired you to get out there and tell your story, because every story matters.